The people of Mindanao are picking up the pieces of their shattered lives from a series of destructive and deadly earthquakes last month. The first one, a magnitude 6.3 quake, hit the province of Cotabato on October 16, and another followed on October 29th. It was a 6.6 magnitude earthquake. The latest one happened just 2 days later on October 31st. A magnitude 6.6 tremor rocked the area again. Today, we'll take a closer look at the hundreds who are injured and thousands more left homeless. We'll discuss their needs, their rehabilitation, and the process of recovery following the devastation. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. The days and weeks that follow an earthquake can be challenging. For doctors and other medical practitioners, the focus, of course, is to attend to the needs of the victims. We are joined today by Dr. Joan May Perez Rifarial, diplomat and fellow of the Philippine Psychiatric Association. We also have Ms. Rachel Ann Miranda. She's the deputy spokesperson of the Office of Civil Defense, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
And now, earthquakes can be fatal and cause widespread injuries. We all know that. First of all, let's get a quick update, Ms. Rachel, on the current status.
Kung titingnan po natin, it all started in July 2019 until the swarming. And it did not just cause tremors in Mindanao, but also landslide incidents, fire incidents, and even collapsed structures.
So there was a buildup of events.
Yes. Somehow, it is attributed to what the people did prior to these tremors. This assessment led us to understanding of what made it a disastrous event. And based on our current situational report in the NDRMC, there are around 47,000 less families who are highly affected in this incident. And there are around 7,400 families inside the evacuation center. So it speaks a lot of what are the necessities or the resources needed. And other than that, including in our report, is that there are around 21 dead and around 417 injured that are attributed to the earthquake incident.
Dr. Joan,
Yes.
with situations like these earthquakes, very common ang injuries like crush injuries, bruises, scratches. Do these types of injuries affect people differently? Meaning, if someone survives, nagalusan lang, as compared to someone na mas malaking injuries, do all these play a factor as well?
The primary concern here in any disaster, in fact, is safety. And once there are injuries sustained, it's important that there are people trained on the site to do first aid, particularly those who sustain more injuries, because definitely it would have effects as well on the recovery and healing.
So what type of injuries can we usually expect with these types of calamities?
Yes, it depends on the type of disaster. So we talked about, we are talking about earthquakes now. So usually injuries sustained from falling debris, from collapsed buildings. So there may be people trapped, and make it more risky for those who have existing mental health issues and physical health issues as well.
A lot of these things in terms of the person can be both immediately, they need first aid, and for long term, they probably need longer health care, probably hospital care as well.
Yes, because there are acute changes and reactions, and which would be manifested in the first hours following the accident or the disaster, and there can be chronic implications as well.
Okay. Now, Ms. Rachel, safety is also a concern with regards to the evacuees in this case, ano? And there have been reports that there are at least around 30 people who reportedly were victims of food poisoning or food spoilage for that matter, ano? What is the situation now with regards to providing support or nutrition to the evacuees?
Specifically for this incident, we have established our incident management team. Their role is to oversee the management of the incident. Pertaining to the food poisoning, there are prepositioned medical practitioners stationed in evacuation centers and even staged in field hospitals to cater the needs of the affected population. But quite interestingly, with the case of the food poisoning, these are people that are actually have received foods from not from the incident management team, but are
Okay.
donated goods from our fellow
Right.
kababayans who are really helpful, who wanted to assist. But given the fact that they did not submit themselves under the operational control of the incident management team,
Hence,
it is
nagkaroon ng
hindi
risk,
natin
oo.
nakita yung
If there were contamination incidents about that. But does the climate, the weather, the humidity also pose a threat in these cases of food poisoning?
Yeah, because of course we know that there should be restrictions or rules to be followed in
Right.
terms of the storage and the delivery of all of these basic needs and necessities.
And I'd like
Yes.
to agree because what makes this particular incident distinct is that nakaserve po siya sa banana leaf. So,
okay.
hindi natin alam kung ano yung
Yeah.
naging proseso ng pagbibigay. So, nakita doon na possibly yung storage, the
Right,
delivery,
right.
that what's make it a source of food poisoning. And ever since naman po na nagmo-monitor tayo ng mga pag-manage ng insidente, isa yan sa mga tinututukan natin because we don't want to add up consequences to the disasters. We don't want to create another disasters
That's
from
right.
this. And that is why, with the help of the community and the people, ating mga kababayan na who wants to help, it is better to recognize that the primary lead of the response is still in the local government unit.
right.
And then, simple as letting them know your response actions, the assistance that you want to provide. That's one way of letting them know as well what they can help you.
So when we return, we'll take a closer look at the emotional and psychological toll on quake survivors. This is Med Talk Health Talk only here on CNN Philippines. Welcome back to the program. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching Med Talk Health Talk right here on CNN Philippines. After a major natural disaster, survivors are frequently coping with a change and the loss. They have lost their loved ones, their homes, and property. Also, they are scared, worried about the uncertainty, and there's really a lot that can take a toll on these families. Still with us is Dr. Joan May Perez Refarial, Diplomat and Fellow of the Philippine Psychiatric Association. And also with us is Ms. Rachel Ann Miranda, Deputy Spokesperson of the Office of Civil Defense, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. So let's talk about how people cope in these kinds of situations. First of all, physically, we have the doctors and health responders there to assess that.
Correct.
But what isn't seen more often is the mental side. How do they cope with situations like this?
It's important to emphasize that disasters, natural disasters, any form of trauma can really have a tremendous psychological impact
Okay.
on those affected individuals, affected families, and we can see various reactions to these stressful events. No? So acutely, we can see physical symptoms like increased blood pressure,
Okay.
difficulty breathing, increased respiratory rate, difficulty sleeping, and confusion, anger. These symptoms can also progress to more
Right.
chronic ones and can become problematic later on. Now, coping is very important. In any disaster, there is that feeling of helplessness.
Right.
There is that feeling of loss of control over the situation, the events, the losses sustained. And so one of the best way to cope with this is to regain that sense of control.
Okay.
And we teach them that if there are things that they can slowly go back to, like go back to their usual daily routines, beginning with having a structured daily activity, like at this time they eat, they play, children
So the
play.
schedule goes
is
back,
very
ano?
important.
Right.
That is a very essential component to
Okay.
coping.
Now, Ms. Rachel, to my knowledge, the government is addressing these concerns with providing people who are adept at handling these kinds of situations, the mental part.
That's right. Actually, with our past experiences, because there are a lot of families inside evacuation centers who stay there for a long time, we provide interventions to at least somehow bring them back to their normalcy. So there are psychosocial interventions This is actually in place and institutionalized with our response cluster system. So it's being led by the Department of Health, together with the DSWD being the camp coordinators and managers,
Right.
together with the Department of Education. So this is an interagency on how to bring back normalcy to these people. So interventions such as film showing, awareness among people, why they are feeling this hazards, giving them the knowledge that it's because of the risk in our community, and other things that would make it a little bit lighter because of the traumatic experience
Correct.
that they've
Right.
recently experienced.
Especially the children, because a lot of
Yes.
children who are in schools probably don't really know how to handle the emotions that they're
Yes.
feeling, or difficult to assess. Now, doctor, how about post-traumatic stress disorder? How soon or how early after a disaster like this can post-traumatic stress disorder set in?
Correct. As mentioned earlier, there are normal responses to these stressors. But if these symptoms persist for maybe weeks to months already, and there is that continuous decline in the level of functionality of both the individuals affected and the families and the community, then we may notice that these symptoms progress. First, people with PTSD may
Right.
have intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts meaning they get nightmares, memories of these distressing events, which can affect their quality of sleep.
Right.
Other symptoms would include continuous avoidance of things, events, or places which would remind them of the
Okay.
traumatic event.
Could these be signs of depression as well?
Oh,
Or is
depression is different. Depression naman, it can result from the, as mentioned earlier, the losses. Because disasters, it's an experience of loss.
Right.
So there can be losses of lives, of families, of houses, the
Okay.
quality of...
So it's very important to have
yeah,
someone on the
livelihoods.
ground as well who understands this and is able to sort of guide these evacuees through this process.
Correct.
Now, another thing that is very important in situations like these is the evacuation center themselves. So sometimes it can be overwhelming and challenging, especially with a crowded condition. How is the government handling this or addressing this? I think one of the major concerns is the ability to get good, clean water as well.
That's right. Well, there's a half percentage of, in Makilala, Cotabato, na na-restore pa lang yung water. Yun yung mga immediate na pangangailangan natin. But currently, we've dispatched, we've deployed resources to cater this immediate needs because we don't want to create other impacts or other incidents that could be affected kapag walang malinis na tubig.
That's right.
Kapag
Especially
hindi
if-
hygienic yung ating...
Yes, the sanitation is one of the
very
major
important.
concerns as well.
But these are all in place and meron na siyang distinguished leadership in the government side. It's, I think, more on how we do it on the ground. Yun yung ini-establish ngayon with the projections as well and the anticipations of preemptive measures na possibly there might be some movements. But since hindi pa natin kaya ma-predict yung earthquake, the
Right.
more that we need to emphasize that these are preemptive measures. But sad to say as well na nakayari na sa evacuation center most of our kababayans is because their houses are totally damaged because of the swarming of the earthquake. So that's the government will be doing later on the rehabilitation and recovery aspect and together with the local government unit.
Okay, and since you mentioned that, Doctor, what
Yes.
kind of effects being displaced from your home, how difficult is this for someone to grasp?
Yes, this can be another form of trauma. It can be a source of traumatic experience for them because this would entail a different new environment and staying with different people. So there is that adjustment to be done to this new situation. So it can pose as a risk to the development of other mental health problems.
Aftershocks are expected to happen for weeks after a quake. That's why people are advised to be ready to drop, cover, and hold. When we return, we'll talk about the best way to protect yourself during an earthquake. Welcome back to the program. During an earthquake and even after one hits, it's not easy to think and act rationally. People often panic, we get confused, and as a result, we could be making decisions that can cause more harm than good. That's why today we're also talking about the do's and don'ts during and after a quake to reduce the risk of injuries and protect ourselves. Still with us is Dr. Joan May Perez Rifarial, and also with us is Ms. Rachel Ann Miranda. Now, let's talk about safety. First of all, what is always being said is how we should drop, cover, and hold.
Yeah, that's right, because it's the technique that will save you if there's a shaking or a tremor, an earthquake. And we should do the proper duck, cover, and hold technique. The most common misconception is that when there's shaking, you go outside immediately. So you shouldn't do that. Wait until the shaking stops. And while it's still shaking, perform the duck, cover, and hold technique. Because most often, among the most recorded incidents are not collapsed structures, rather falling debris inside rooms. So duck, cover, and hold technique will help you at least ensure your safety while they're shaking. And then after that, go immediately to the safety exit signs, routes, and proceed to the assembly site. But it's most important as well to note that you do not use elevator when there's an earthquake incident.
Okay, definitely. Yes, those are good points to say. Now, Doctora, we've been talking about the welfare mostly of the evacuees, you know, but a group of people mostly that isn't talked about are the volunteers, the social workers, and the first responders to these kinds of events. Are their mental status at risk as well?
Yes, definitely. Trauma, effects of trauma is not limited to the direct victims. There are also indirect victims, like those who hear about what happened to their loved ones. Hidden victims would include those who are in the first line of response to these situations. So they are also at risk to develop psychological and emotional symptoms, especially if they get to be repeatedly assigned to that particular area where they witness the severity of the damages to individuals and families.
Okay. Now, Ms. Rachel, what is a good go bag? Because a lot of people want to be prepared, but they're not really sure. But one of the things that even the Philippine Red Cross advises is having a ready-made go bag. So what do you think should be in that kit? Anong kasama?
Well, we actually advise every family or even your individual to carry a go bag, meaning to say if there's an incident, you carry it everywhere you go.
Right.
So what's inside it is basically your flashlight, your whistle, radio, if possible, ready-to-eat meals, first aid kit, of course.
Correct.
Do not forget that. And other materials that you think would be beneficial when you will be displaced to an evacuation site. Me, I always carry around a whistle and a flashlight. That is just like a keychain. So I think it's easy to, embody that, because there's a sense that you will be safe, or if you're trapped inside, you can use this kinds of materials.
Right, in the sense of preparedness. Now, should someone have a go bag per family, like a big bag for the whole family, or is this an individual thing? Like even the kids should have their own go bag?
Well, it's advisable that in a family there must be a go bag, but the materials that are necessary for you, your key to not just surviving but living, it should be part of your everyday life, and it's quite easy, and it's not expensive. And I think every individual this is your must-haves.
Right.
And by the time you need it, you actually have it. So there's a less undue panic when the time happens.
Now, what are some of the tips that the relatives of those survivors, what should they look out for?
There should be monitoring because, again, the acute stressful reactions can progress, and if left unmonitored, it may pose as a problem later on, and it may become a mental health problem or disorder. So what we should look out for is functionality. If there is any difficulty in doing the tasks or work or any other academic decline, and then there should be that monitoring. And of course, self-harm thoughts, self-harm behaviors, like being into negative forms of coping, like using cigarettes, alcohol drinking as a form of coping is something that we should avoid.
Okay, all right. And with that, do you have a message for our audience, Ms. Rachel?
Regarding Dr. Joanne's statement that actually the government doesn't stop here during the response phase. We will be with our kababayans in the recovery and rehabilitation to bring back the lives of the people affected into normalcy. And what I'd like to emphasize with the role of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council is that your preparedness doesn't happen overnight. It should be done prior to any incident. That's why we always emphasize that prevention and mitigation, you know, the best way to deal and manage with disasters. And that's go alongside with the preparedness component. And every community has a role to play in building resiliency in the country. We highly encourage all our kababayans to participate, be highly involved, understand your risk in your community. What is the nearest fault line? What are the historical data in your barangay? By simply acknowledging this data, this scientific knowledge, so by the time it happens, you know, you are prepared. And maybe it is one way of building culture of resilience in the Philippines.
Okay. Dr. Joan, do you have a message?
Yeah, for those affected by the recent earthquakes in Mindanao, please reach out, reconnect, hopefully with a good support system, and being able to talk about it also helps in the expression and in the recovery as well.
Okay. Safety first is the name of the game. We'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Joan May Perez Rifarial and Ms. Rachel Ann Miranda of OCD NDRRMC. Thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk right here on CNN Philippines.